Yeah, I'm in the United Kingdom. I don't know, man. Like, shit's wild out here. What can I say? What can I fucking
That
say?
that good, huh?
Oh yeah, I like had to go ahead and not watch the debates last night because I knew I would get too angry.
Mm-hmm.
And like even the clips of it are making me so angry that it's just like I just need the next 4 weeks to go faster. That's what I need to happen. I need to like come out the other side of this fucking election, watch these labor cunts just like have their little fucking self-congratulatory party and then, be done with it because I'm losing my mind. What can I say? It's like, when there's like no hope, there's like no fucking hope, right? At all whatsoever.
Yeah.
And so I just want to get through this with the least amount of having to pay attention to these guys as they pat themselves on the back and pretend that like anything is going to change. Ugh.
Brutal. Brutal.
Like, I mean, fully, I tortured you with like Keir Starmer stuff. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
We did a Patreon episode about how awful he is.
Yeah.
Half of it anyway, yeah.
Okay, so like, Milo's got this, our mate over at Masters and Trash Future. He's got a really good impression of Starmer. And the thing about it is that, like, Starmer just says things in real life that it sounds like Milo's making fun of him. Where, like, he's always, like, being like, I welcome, blah, 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 but I encourage them to go further. And, like, this is an actual excerpt that, like, was from one of, like, the news people who were, like, doing a write-up of it last night. Mm-hmm. So at 9:23 at night. Sunak says that NHS strikes were a factor. Junior doctors wanted a 35% pay raise, but he would not agree to that because he does not want to put taxes up, he says. He challenges Starmer to explain how he would resolve the strike. Starmer starts to attack the government's record. Sunak asks again what Starmer would do. Starmer says, if allowed to get a warden, I will explain. I will do it in a grown-up way, but I will not reveal my tactics now. He would do it in a grown-up way, Luke. He'd do it in a grown-up way. I'll tell you how he would do this.
Oh, man.
And, like, he won't even fucking say what his plan is. Like, P.S. his plan is to do nothing. Like, he's not going to do anything. Like, that's the plan. He's going to continue. But before, when they wouldn't say what it was they were going to do, everyone would go, oh, yeah, because they don't want the Tories stealing their ideas. And I'm like, yeah, it would really suck if the Tories did something. Like, I don't give a fuck who does it. Mm-hmm. As long as it's something good. Like, I genuinely don't care. Like, if the Tories were like, yeah, we're going to tax the rich and pay for the NHS, I would be like, great, I don't give a fuck. Please do that.
Why would you need to hide that? Like, the stuff that you need to hide is, like, the method and the internal process, the idea behind building your great coalition.
Yeah.
That's the stuff you hide. The stuff you don't hide is when you're like, yeah, this guy sucks, and here's how he sucks. Because, like, it's not like there's some secret form of politics that hasn't yet been discovered
Exactly.
by people, like that, where people are going to be like, well, I mean, there are already political parties and people out there who are like, all of these people should be killed.
Yeah.
All should be lined up against the wall and shot. Like, it doesn't get any more extreme than that. So there's not really anything that you can hide, and especially not anything that you can hide that would work within, like, a confined system like the current, UK economy. It's just like, what the fuck?
And it's like, and this is the thing, is like, you're running now, so what's your plan? And it's like, I'm not going to tell you what my plan is. It's like, oh, okay, cool. All right, and the fucked up thing is this guy is going to win by so much. It's going to be like such a fucking landslide, just because everyone hates the Tories so much, and because the press has finally turned on the Tories, right? So it's partially why they've turned on the Tories is because Keir Starmer is just a Tory. and all of the press
Yeah.
are Tories. So they're like, okay, well, good, nothing good is going to happen, so we can let this guy get into office.
Yeah.
But I'm just like, I can't. I'm just losing it, and I'm not like, ugh.
Yeah, it's yeah, well, I mean, at least you know that you get to laugh at like the coming labor collapse, you know, of it, because like one, you know, you've already got the Tories thoroughly discredited. You got Labor, which are tacking to the right and becoming Tories, and when they collapse, well, then you know. You know, so that's a party right there, I guess. I don't know. I guess we'll see.
Yeah,
Could be worse. It could be worse. You could have your opponent having been convicted of 34 felonies and be possibly facing jail time, even though I don't think he's going to get jail time for this. But you could have that, and then you don't get a huge bump in the polls because you're so old and senile that the drugs that they give you to do interviews aren't working anymore, and you just keep being like, you know, I mean, all of this is Hamas's fault. Like,
yeah,
you know,
obviously.
all of it, and like you've been saying the same thing for 8 months. Like, it's going to change anything. It's like, dog, I don't know. If you can't get a poll bump off of a dude getting convicted of 34 felonies after the jury deliberated for like an hour and a half, I don't know, man. I don't know that you're qualified to run a fucking Dairy Queen, much less a
I know, right?
the goddamn nuclear arsenal of the main polar, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
Not saying the other guy is qualified to run it either. Neither of them are.
Yeah,
They're both too old and awful. But like, if you don't get a poll bump off of that, I don't know what to tell you, man. Maybe time to hang it up. Go to the old people farm.
Yep. Yep. Oh, God. Anyway, you want to talk about other rich people who control the world? I don't know.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's fucking do it. Like, it's too depressing, mate. I can't fucking even talk about politics. Let's just talk about fucking Charlemagne. I'm dying.
It'll be done. It'll be done for you in a month. It'll be done for you in a month, and then you could get back to laughing at the fact that we here in America still have like 4 months. No, wait, yeah, 4. Yeah. So good times. That'll be cool. All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1. Hello, welcome back to We're Not So Different, a podcast about how,
I don't fucking know, man.
Fuck off, you old bastards. Anyway,
yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, I'm Luke. That's Eleanor. You guys know the deal. Anyway, yeah. Today, we are talking about Karl the Great. No,
that's right.
Not Marx, the other one. But before we do, just wanted to make a quick note of more news that is tangentially related to this podcast, because recently the Pope said that they were going to make Carlo Acutis the first millennial saint. He
shout out
is a guy. Yep, shout out to him. He's going to be the patron saint of the internet. That's not a joke.
I wouldn't joke about something like that.
His feast day is October 12th. And yeah, he died in 2006 of leukemia, but there's a couple of miracles on the books for him now, and he's going to be the first millennial canonized by the church. And yeah, there you go. That's we talked about saints recently. Eleanor, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, rest in peace, King. You would have loved meme formats.
That's that's right, man. You would have converted so many people with dank memes.
I mean, it's so fucking okay. But can I just point out that this is so funny if we compare and contrast it with our recent Patreon episode where we were talking about the Habsburg Conference and how they're trying to like get a new Habsburg saint made. It's like, homie, like I tell you what, we're out here with the millennial saint. We're out here with the patron saint of the motherfucking internet. He doing I don't even know what kind of like he's defragging your
blessing
computer.
People through like C++ and Ubuntu. What the fuck are you doing, man? Oh, I help some people with a marriage. Oh, look at us. We're trying. Like, look, you don't even have the money to buy your way into sainthood. Meanwhile, they are putting this kid who fucking loved programming and thinking about saints into it. Struggles.
So, yeah.
Struggling.
Fucking, you know what? Like, Habsburg's defeated once again in the marketplace of ideas. So, that's, I feel, I love Carlo. Like, pray for us, Carlo. You know, please keep my computer virus free. Thank you.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. I think everybody knows my feelings on the Catholic Church, but if you have a problem with this guy becoming a saint, and you're Catholic, I don't understand what you want.
That's just some nerd shit.
This is how it goes.
This is how it goes.
This is how it goes. You're just mad that he's young. Like, this is how it goes. You have these things. You have two supposed miracles that, like, you know, aren't borderline miracles. At least they really don't, you know, seem like it in the way that, you know, a lot of other ones might be. But, like, you got this. He seemed to, you know, really want to live like a monkish life. Like, this is what you want. Like, if you want the continuation of the Catholic Church and it to be, you know, regenerated into something better than it is now, you know, this is the kind of, like, thing that you have to have. You have to have you have to have a millennial saint, and then the Gen Z saint, and then the Gen Alpha saint who, you know, has the haircut where it's only curly hair on the top and he says bussin' a lot. You are going to have the bussin' saint. That's what you're gonna have to have. The no cap saint. You have to have it.
For real.
If you want to keep this around. If you don't, well, then there you go.
Which is it? Do you want the young people to be Catholic or not?
Yep.
Question.
Also, the church that they built for him, and it is the relic that is in it is his heart in a jar, in like a cool jar,
metal,
which is dope as fuck. Yeah. Anyway, Catholic Church still undefeated when it comes to cool old ceremonies. At least that one thing. A lot of other problems, but, you know, they got that there. That's undeniably fucking metal. Yeah. Anyway, Carlo Acutis, thank you, King. You know,
pray for us,
can't believe you let my hard drive fail a couple years ago, but I'll let it slide. Any bad thing or good thing that happens with regards to computers is now going to be this guy's fault.
That's right.
To me. So yeah. All right, we got a couple questions. Yeah. First one from White Trash Historian. So I want to know if Eleanor knows some stuff about fairy traditions in the Middle Ages. Like, we know a bunch of the Irish fairy traditions, but what else was there?
Oh, I mean, there's tons, basically. So, you know, it's one of the things that Joan of Arc gets accused of when she is accused of witchcraft is like doing weird fairy shit out at the local tree. Right? Fairies come up a lot in terms of royal genealogies. So, for example, the start of the Przemyslid dynasty, the big like Czech ruling Bohemian family, is that a plowman named Przemysl marries a fairy queen named Libuge, and like that's how you get the Przemyslids. Merlin is the son of a fairy. Huh? So it's like it comes up in literary sources and things like that, and in dynasties and genealogies a lot. But we also have like back and forth from various sources. So, for example, like we know the church isn't big on it. They say that they aren't real. And so, like, for example, I've just got some sources up for us out of this. We've got a sermon from about 1400 in England where they talk about there are also those who say that they can see women and girls dancing by night whom they call elvish folk, and they believe that these can transform both men and women, or, leaving others in their place, carry them off with them to Elfland. And they're saying that, like, this isn't real and don't believe in this.
Elfland.
Elfland.
Hell yeah.
I mean,
I like that.
Yeah, right? And
They were also trying to find Rivendell. God. Yeah.
A bunch of our sources that we also have, though, are very specifically Icelandic. And it's still like a big belief in Iceland to this day. And so we've got a 16th century written account. And it says, but some beings who live in the hills close to men are more amicable and not so dangerous unless they chance to have been harmed by some kind of injury and are provoked to wickedness. They seem indeed to be endowed with bodies of incredible subtlety, since they are even thought to enter into mountains and hills. They are invisible to us unless they wish to appear of their own volition. Yet the certain properties of certain men's eyes are such that the presence of no spirit can ever escape their sight. So you might be magic and be able to see them. They know 1,000 devices and an infinite number of tricks with which they harass men in wretched ways. But their young people are said to have a similar stature, clothing, and even way of life to that of their human neighbors, and to take excessive pleasure in coupling with humans. So they do be trying to fuck us. Examples are not lacking of a number of rogues who are said to have impregnated women beneath the earth and had access to them at fixed times or as many times as they wished. And from time to time, the women of our land have been oppressed by these earth dwellers, and innocent boys and girls and the young people and adolescents of both sexes have very often been taken away, though quite a few are restored safe and sound after a number of days or sometimes a number of weeks. But some are never seen again, and certain ones are found half alive, etc. Okay, so this is a good, like, folk belief kind of thing. And what is really difficult a lot of times in the Middle Ages is for us to get information on folk beliefs, because obviously regular people can't read and write, and the church is like, this shit isn't real, and I'm not going to fucking dignify that with a response. I'm not going to fucking write it down. So how are we going to get the goods, right? So these are good ways of us finding out what regular ass people think. So basically, we have a kind of pan-European set of beliefs. Okay, so they tend to be that fairies are kind of like morally ambiguous. They're not necessarily good. They're not necessarily evil. They could help us. They could make things worse. They either live alongside us and we can't see them, or they live in the air sometimes, or sometimes they live in like fairyland, but they come and interact with humans. They look and act like humans, but that can be a result of magic that they use to make themselves appear like us. They usually appear like humans who are very, very hot. And they appear to us if they want to either help us out with something or fuck with us. They are very specifically interested in like having sex with us, and they can abduct us and take us away to another land, right? And these are pretty much like standard. So it's kind of a bit of a muddle. You'll have other things on top of that about like what it is that they're doing, if they're malevolent, beliefs about iron, beliefs about changelings, things like that. But what is this? These are the stock pan-European beliefs at the time. And I've got a book recommendation on this if you want to know more. Would you like to know more?
Yes.
Which is very specifically, oh gosh, I've now lost my page. This is fucking great radio, Eleanor. It is a very good book, which I've read before, and I pulled out specifically for this. Okay, there it is. Elf Queens and Holy Friars, Fairy Beliefs and the Medieval Church. And this is by Richard Firth Green. So this is very specifically, we get more information from the church's viewpoint. So yeah, go read that, I think. Yes.
Yeah. White Trash Historian, thank you for the question. We got one more before we get on, and it is from Archbishop Absalom's Ample Ass, who says, What are some of the more interesting results of animal husbandry in the period? I know the development of destriers, which are horses, for example, but is there a goose specifically bred for quills?
It's dogs is the big one. Dogs, falcons, and sheep are.
Is this where they start breeding dogs for very, very specific purposes?
Yes.
Like having long snouts so they can dig out, creatures, or like terriers that are bred to go into cairns or whatever.
Yeah, like 100%. So
Yeah.
like there's all kinds of medieval dog breeds that are still common now, like wolfhounds, greyhounds. My favorite type of dogs / the dogs I grew up with, Tibetan Mastiffs. They are a medieval breed. But stuff like Saint Bernards, right? They're like made from the Saint Bernard monastery. And we see in particular when people kind of like talk about breeding dogs, we have sources from at least the 8th century, specifically from monasteries, which they call Hundsaufzuchtung, or dog increasing, which Charlemagne, our boy, decreed like people should look into, right? So they talk about like how to kind of like breed kind of dogs, like how all the monasteries have like their own kinds of dogs that they're kind of bringing up. And there are also very specific things that we get. For example, like the French kings are like, I'm going to breed dogs for X, Y, and Z purpose. So we know that people are like really interested very specifically in coming up with dogs for various things, which is how you get dachshunds. It's how you get like, all kinds of really weird little guys. And medieval people really intimately understand what it takes. Then also sheep, of course. And it's like there are tons of medieval sheep types. Like just in fucking England alone, there's dozens, right? Got some cool classifications of medieval sheep breeds for you. You got Orkney sheep, you know. Like unsurprising. Of course, they're going to have their own type. They're all out there. But you can have like white-faced and horned-headed, which is stuff like the Cheviot or Welsh mountain sheep. You can have black-faced with a horned head. Shout out, to the Derbyshire Gritstone. Shout out Derby, #1. Pew, pew, pew. You can have white-faced short wools like the Kerry Hill or the Dorset Horn. Or the black-faced short wools, like the Clune or the Shropshire or the Dorset Down. Like the Romney Marsh sheep are a demi-luster long wool of medium length. Like, so, of course, like, when wool is as important as it is, sheep are one of the big ones. So you get absolutely tons of that. Lots of dogs, lots of sheep, a lot of horses, a little bit less in terms of stuff like oxen. But it is definitely happening. But we have like fewer like, oh, this is what they're just like made a big fucking ox. You like that shit? Out here plowing, And we know that they are also doing it with like pigs and swine. So geese I couldn't find anything on, but I'll tell you the #1 is like dogs and sheep. Yeah.
Nice. Cool. Archbishop Absalom's Ample asks, thank you so much for the question. If you like questions like these and want to ask some yourself, please subscribe to our Patreon. Patreon.com/WNSDpod. $5 a month. You get all of these episodes ad-free. Over 60 bonus episodes. We've got our second one on in our book club series on The Name of the Rose coming this Friday. Check that out. It is a lot of fun, and it helps us out. And, we like it. So cool. Yeah, anyway, on to the main show. So, folks, it has come to our attention that we've never done an episode dedicated to Charlemagne. It's odd, given that we're the preeminent medieval history podcast.
That's right.
It was voted on by people. It's odd given that we're the preeminent medieval history podcast, and he's, one of the most important figures in world history and the medieval ruler. But I hear you intone. Was he really so great? This is just another textbook example of big medieval throwing their weight and money around to historians to make some idiotic ruler from the past seem more important than they really were. Well, first off, let me just say, how dare you insinuate we're in the pocket of big medieval, a very real and very powerful organization. The idea is downright defamatory. Have you no shame? The nerve, the unmitigated gall. Anyway, to answer your original question, yep, that kept going so long I had to clear my throat. To answer your original question, while no men are truly great in the historical context, yes, Charlemagne really was that important to world history. This is quite unfortunate given all the awful people who have rightly or wrongly co-opted his legacy over the past 1,200 years. And yet, his importance and legacy persist all the same. Charlemagne is so important that he has been called the father of Europe by historiographers and is considered the template for all medieval rulership. And father is sometimes quite literal, as Charlemagne is considered a direct line ancestor of the French Capetian dynasty, the Burgundian House of Ivrea, and the Holy Roman Imperial Ottonian, Luxembourg, and Habsburg dynasties. They learned it from watching you, Dad. So what makes Charlemagne so important? Well, he was the first person to be crowned emperor in Western and Central Europe since the fall of Romulus Augustulus and the Western Roman Empire in 476. He was a strong warrior of great renown, a shrewd, capable diplomat, and a strong proponent of cultivating culture and the life of the mind. He's also likely the only person in world history to have ruled over a fully formed feudal system as it is popularly understood today, containing the feudal military customs, the feudal land tenure system for peasant farming, and the feudal social superstructure overseen in some part by the church. Obviously, the church didn't have that much power then, but you know what we're saying. He was also the forerunner of the true Holy Roman Emperors who would come later, a structure that lasted until the 19th century. He was even venerated as a saint by an anti-pope, though never officially by the church, which is kind of a dick thing when you think about it, because he really helped the popes out a lot, but whatever.
Yeah, true.
However, if all this Charlemagne talk sickens you, never fear, because next week we will follow it up with one of our occasional medieval fail-son episodes, wherein we talk about why Charlemagne's vaunted Carolingian dynasty only survived his death by about 70 years, thanks to Karl's 4 moronic boys.
Oh, they're so stupid.
We're going to take them down a peg next time. So if you're just really anti-Charlemagne, just bear with it. Grit your teeth here. I hate him so much. And then get ready for next time. Anyway, yeah, so we're just going to talk a bit about him. And yeah, that'll be it. Eleanor, what do we know about Charlemagne, his early life, his upbringing, education, things of that sort?
So we know some is the answer.
Yeah.
Less than you would think, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're a little bit sketchy on when he was born. We have basically worked it out because according to Einhard, who wrote about it in the Royal Frankish Annals, he died at about 71. And so we think that this is kind of like 748. He was born, but other people say it was 742, which is kind of like a traditional date, right? So it's like we don't even really quite know when Homeboy was born. His parents are Pepin the Short King, and Bertrada, who was from an Austrasian family, like pretty high up nobles. So, he's born into court. And now Pepin the Short, we know a little bit more about like his education and things for whatever reason. There's just more on record about that. But we can kind of extrapolate from that because basically it's like, well, if his dad was receiving a pretty good education, then it's likely that he would have as well. And his dad was set off to the monastery to like learn things of this nature. So he was educated at Saint-Denis, one of like the premier monasteries. But we don't really know about Charlemagne's formal education. But we know that, he's smart enough. There's like some debate. For example, it's like Homeboy likes posh boy things. Homeboy likes, classical texts, and he likes stuff like this, but we don't know if he is like reading them himself. He's certainly not writing things down himself, but that's not weird, right? Because rich people don't write. Like you have a scribe for that shit. Like writing with a quill is super fucking hard. Like I can't do it. And I know how to write. You know, so like if you can imagine, it's like one of these things where like even if you're literate, a lot of the time you don't write your own letters. Like you have staff for that, right? And we know that he tends to kind of like interact with literature by having it read to him. But this is also super common. Like medieval people, for example, they don't read silently. They pretty much read out loud.
Awful.
Like
awful,
they,
just awful.
yeah, it's like a thing. Like they it's not really taught that you like. I like it's one of the things about Aquinas is he can read silently, and everyone's like, "Oh shit," you know, like about this.
I never knew that.
Yeah,
that's
so.
great. They're like, "Whoa, this guy can read without reciting it to himself." What the fuck?
You know, yeah.
Like, oh my god, oh shit! It's like, you know, first person to see a light bulb, the first person, you know, to read without talking. Yeah.
And it's like, so Charlemagne says that he had like a liberal arts education, but whether he did that himself as an adult because he liked it or he received it as a kid, we just don't fucking know. Right. So it's like early life is a little bit shady, but that's pretty normal for the 8th century. Like not everybody is writing down where they went to school at the time. You know, like it's not that strange, all things considered, basically. So yeah, and we know that he kind of like speaks, we think, a kind of form of Old High German, and like and probably one of the Romance dialects, and he speaks Latin. So you know he's pretty all right in terms of things like that, right?
Yeah. It seems like an understatement to say that Western Europe in the mid 8th century was way different than we see it now. So what, you know, as Charlemagne is coming to power in 768, you know, what does Western Europe kind of look like?
So you don't really have kingdoms so much as realms. I mean, you do have kingdoms. Like there's the kingdom. So the big ones to keep in mind here are the Kingdom of the Franks, or Franconia, sometimes it's called. And that is like a lot of what you think of as France, Switzerland, the Alsace, like into part of Germany and parts of the lowlands. You've got over in what will become England, you've got like the kind of heptarchy. So you've got like Northumberland and Mercia and Wessex and all that going on. You got the Picts up in Scotland. The Irish are being Irish. Down on the Iberian Peninsula, we've got the Umayyad Emirate currently. There's the Kingdom of Galicia, which is up in like the northwest corner. The Bretons are still holding it down separately over on the peninsula in what is now France. The Basques are basking, most Bascally. And then on the Italian peninsula, you have got the Kingdom of the Lombards, which is like northern Italy. You've got the Papal States, the Duchy of Spoleto, and the Duchy of Benevento, which is kind of like down in the south. And then there's a couple places like Bavaria exists as a duchy. But then other than that, it's like Frisia.
Yeah.
Like in places like that, Saxony. And then it's like there be Slavs. Right, we got a fucking Khanate over in like what is now like Hungary. Like the Avars are over there. So like my point is, this shit does not look like Europe now, right? It's like it is just a real different time, and we need to just kind of go with that, right?
No, looking at a map of the Mediterranean world in Europe, there is, as far as I could tell, no current political structure that even remotely resembles any of these, because like we don't like what we call France, the realm of the Franks, which I guess is the predecessor to France, is far larger than it would have been. There's no, Spain or Portugal. It's all the Umayyads. Italy is the mess that Italy will be until
for a long time.
Whatever 1920 or whatever it is.
Correct.
So it's a fucking mess. After the Roman Empire fell, all of these previously Roman, areas, they just fall into, a mess of warring khanates and kingdoms and duchies and whatever else. So about 768, Charlemagne is crowned, and he is initially just crowned. I think he gets after Pepin the Short dies, Charlemagne and his brother get territory. But it always seemed his brother Carloman, which is a really cool fucking name.
I gotta just also right now shout something out. There's a band called Carloman, and they make fake medieval albums, and I really recommend them. So there's
that's awesome.
They've got 4 albums: Carloman, Carloman 2, Carloman 3, and Saint Miscellaneous.
That's awesome.
And you should check them out because they go hard. They're on Bandcamp. So just shout out to some real ones. We simply love Carloman.
Hell yeah. And basically Charlemagne gets Neustria, which is I guess a lot of central France, kind of. But Carloman seems to get the rest of it. And he. So how does Charlemagne go from basically just getting Neustria, which is north central northwest France, into this empire that by his death in 814 covers almost all of the Italian peninsula and well into almost Eastern Europe, basically.
Well, first of all, Carloman fucking dies.
Yeah,
right. That's number one, right?
Also, a lot of people didn't seem to really like him.
Yeah,
people were just kind of yeah, whatever, man. Nobody gives a shit.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one because and this will help set us up for the Fail Sons episode next week. There isn't this whole kind of winner take all primogeniture system going on at the time. So Pepin the Short is well, I've got 2 sons, so they're both going to rule Francia. There you go. You're both the kings of Francia. Good job. Right. And so Charlemagne's got Austrasia, he's got Neustria or whatever, and Carloman has got Burgundy and Provence and all these things, right?
Yeah.
But they also have this really big problem, which is Aquitaine, who are in open rebellion against the King of France. And Charlemagne is we need to go over there and fuck some Aquitanians up. And Carloman is no.
I think not.
I will not fucking do that.
I got all this land from Dad, and Charlemagne's yeah, I got fuck all.
Yeah, and he's
you,
I don't what, and so Carloman is I'm too busy maxing and relaxing. So basically, Charlemagne just gets really pissed off at him. We don't really know why Carloman didn't want to do it, but he probably was just busy up north or something like that. So anyway, they still have joint rule because it's just too hard to go into open war, right? And then basically, then there is just this death, and then Charlemagne is oh well, I guess I'm the fucking king of the Franks now,
yeah,
right? And he basically marches directly into Carloman's territory, his wife Gerberga. Shout out, real name alert. It has to dip, takes their kids and runs.
Yeah.
And then Charlemagne then divorces his wife and marries this woman Hildegard, who is the daughter of one of the really powerful counts in his kingdom. And so, and that's because his father-in-law of his first marriage had been sheltering Carloman's family, so his fucking he was yeah, I'm about to kill my sister-in-law and sundry nieces and nephews, and Darius his fucking father-in-law is what the fuck, dude, don't do that. And he's divorcing your daughter now, that's what's up.
What of it?
So it's really fucked up. And they end up kind of running into the kingdom of the Lombards, which right.
Yeah.
So they kind of run to northern Italy because they're surely he is not going to fucking stalk us here. And oh boy,
Yeah.
Yow.
As the kings of Lombardy are wont to do. They got a good thing going for a little while, and then they're just going to get fucking smashed. Like, nope. Yeah. I think Charlemagne, he kind of clears them out, clears the Italian peninsula down to like
You sure do.
south of Rome out of all this. And it's all of a sudden you got all of current or almost all of current day France into a huge part of current day Germany and all that. And then now you've got the hard working, like the good producing part of the Italian peninsula in terms of like, soil and iron and all that kind of shit. And there you go. Now you got yourself an empire. Now you're cooking with gas here.
Yeah. And like he also expands into the Saxon territories up north and like kicks the shit out of them.
Oh yeah.
Like really, and like and they've got rather a lot of gold and silver, so he has all this like monetary stuff where he can then like start paying people off to get involved with this shit. So like Carloman's supporters who are like, don't agree with like you attempting to kill your sister-in-law and nibblings, but do agree with your Saxon ass kicking policy. So shit, I guess like we definitely got to fall in line behind you, right? And so then they're like, all right, well, here we go, bitch. Like get in, bitch. We're attacking Pavia, right? Or Pavia, I suppose. And so like they cross the fucking Alps. They go straight to Pavia and like attack that because that's the capital of the Lombards. Charlemagne's having sundry various children with Hildegard at this point. And then like basically he then like goes and takes Verona. Like he goes and takes like various places on the Italian peninsula. And then Ginty Nelson, who is like one of the coolest ladies to ever live, shout out Ginty. She says that basically he then like pulls a Princess in the Tower on Carloman's wife and the boys. So we're just like,
and all those Ricardists in England are like, oh, so it's okay for Charlemagne to do it, but it's not okay for Richard III to do it. And the answer is yes, because Charlemagne was successful, and Richard III got BTFO'd and killed on a battlefield when nobody liked him anymore.
That's right.
By an upstart Welsh kid. So
that's right.
Yeah,
basically.
pretty much. That's how it works. Yeah.
Maybe he shoved him into a monastery. I doubt it.
Yeah.
All right.
Look, Charlemagne, I don't know that you can know a ton about anybody's personality from this long ago, like really, but he didn't seem like the type to worry about he understood the dynastic game, he understood the politics of that world, and how it would come to be throughout most of Europe and a lot of other places in the Middle Ages. But like, if he put, I don't know, him putting them in a monastery would be insanely shocking. That would be like, like the Bolsheviks putting,
being like, well, Anastasia can go.
Yeah, Anastasia can go. We'll put her in a nunnery, a convent.
Yeah, like she's okay. It's just everybody else. Right?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, he's so like, we talked about this stuff, but like, is Charlemagne just like an amazing leader in battle? Like, is he like an insane like warrior? Like he's taking people one-on-one, or like, what about that? And how does his military success use the, as we understand it, feudal levy system for the only time in history? Probably.
Yeah, basically. It's like the only time that feudalism, as we talk about it, exists is under him. So, we basically start off, right? So he does a really good line in being like, well, what is doable? Like, this is the thing that's really quite smart about him, is that he's like, what is it that is going to be easiest for me, and what can I kind of like do, like what is the best thing to do? So the first thing that he kind of tends to do is go for bordering things, right? And things that are quite low-hanging fruit, right? So it's like the Lombards is kind of, first of all, because, well, that's a lot of fucking money that is just hanging out over there. And he does this really cannily in that, he has all these sieges. He takes Pavia. He also has a reason to go kicking indoors because he's after killing his nieces and nephews or whatever. So like this is a reason to kind of go into the Lombard kingdom. And he ends up getting south of Rome. But then what he very shrewdly does is kind of bring the papacy on board. And the papacy is like, oh, Charlemagne, you're here. What the kids think is really cool is papal sovereignty and not killing the Pope. And basically Charlemagne is like, yeah, I got you boys. Like, no worries.
Yeah.
Like he and Pope Adrian do this big thing of like swearing allegiance to each other over the relics of St. Peter.
Bro, just kiss and get it over with. Oh like, my God.
Jesus, like the twinks will do anything,
Yeah.
But that happens, right? And then, as I say, he goes into Saxony. And this is like a really easy win for him because the Saxons had been like raiding over into Austrasia, which he had been ruling for ages before then. So it's like, it's time to kick some Saxon ass. And that is a really good one for him and an easy win because these guys are all pagans, right? So the Lombards, it's a little bit more like, ooh, you're in the church's backyard. And what are you going to do about that? But the other thing about the Lombards that makes it good for him, is that Lombardy is an elective kingdom. So they don't have like some kind of big royal family thing that they're like, oh yeah, it's always these guys. And you've hurt my feelings because my emotional support kings are being kicked out or whatever. They're like, all right, well, I guess we're fucking electing you, right? Like it's just a little bit easier for them to take it on. Saxony, you've got like this great story about the triumph of Christendom over the pagans. So that's an easy one to kind of get into. Then when he's got the support of Lombardy and Saxony and all these other places, he starts going into various places like Gascony. So that's kind of like the southwest corner of France. So like bordering on like Bordeaux and places like that, really easy to get there, right? And like even down into the Spanish March. And he's also then expanding east into like Bavaria and Carinthia, right? Which again are these places that are bordering his lands. And again, he's got this kind of like plausible deniability over there where it's like, I mean, Bavaria is Christian, but like Carinthia, right? Kind of a deal. So like he's going around baptizing people. So people really like this, right? So like he has this big assembly in 777 at Paderborn where he like brings together a bunch of like Frankish and Saxon rulers, right? And then like this is kind of like a big opportunity to like do the kind of like feudal oath thing, right? And he's able to do this expansion into these places that are considered pagan because he could be like, yeah, and you'll get some fucking land. And everyone was like, oh yeah, okay, well, cool. I'll definitely do that. With the Spanish marches, meanwhile, it's like, well, you're fighting Muslims, which everybody likes, right? So like there is kind of like a lot of moving in there. Now, this isn't to say that any of this is really easy. The Saxons really resist this. Bavaria revolts. There's like a Pepin's revolt against all of this nonsense where they're like, I just do not fucking, I'm not down for this at all. But what has already been established is that it's possible, right, to hold all of these places. And there's guys who want money and land enough that they're like, yeah, okay, we'll like fucking do that. But then meanwhile, like also the papacy is on side. And I am constantly harping on about how like the papacy is not that important at this point in time, but Charlemagne is part of what makes them important. And like having that, even if they're just the bishops of Rome or whatever, the bishops of Rome are still really important. Like, if the Patriarch of Constantinople supports you, that is like a big point in your favor one way or another, fundamentally. So he does this really kind of like savvy acquisition of lands, and he's good at making friends where he needs to in order to make enemies.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, that is that's Charlemagne, and that takes us up with him until about the year 800. At least in the martial aspect of it. We'll get to the cultural stuff momentarily, but he gets there, and wouldn't you know it, he in 800 he goes to Aachen. He gets crowned as the King of the Romans by the Pope. And yeah, not the real Holy Roman Empire or the emperor that we would see about a century later under the Ottonians, but still important and seen universally as a forerunner to them.
Yes, absolutely. Like, we tend to talk about the Carolingian Empire in the same breath as the Holy Roman Empire. It's not the same thing, but all the stuff involved with Charlemagne getting crowned emperor becomes like the template that the Ottonians and stuff will use later when they're setting up the Holy Roman Empire, right? So like the coronation by the Pope, that was just kind of something that Charlemagne was doing because he thought it was cute. Like, Leo had got his ass beat up in Rome. He was almost blinded. So he got like hauled up to Charlemagne's court for protection. And then he's like, oh, while you're here, why don't you just like crown me or whatever, right? Like, and so, you know, he gets crowned. Lovely, wonderful things, right? Like, whether or not Charlemagne planned this, or if it was just kind of like, oh, this is a cute way of doing things, this will become like one of the big cornerstones for what Holy Roman emperors are yelling at the church about for basically the rest of the medieval period. Because popes will be like, well, we crown you and you aren't the emperor until we crown you. And emperors are like, get fucked. You crown me because I'm the emperor. Like, that's how it works. And so, yeah, like, you have to understand, too, that, like, the Roman Empire is a living thing to these people, right? Like, Byzantium is not called Byzantium. It's called the Roman Empire. And they're like, yeah, okay. Like, they still hold big parts of it. Like, they still hold Sicily, you know, like they hold like a lot of like southern Italy and things at the time. And so they're like, the West has an emperor again. That's cute. You know, like, so they're kind of like, oh, right. Yeah, that's fine. So like, it kind of makes sense. When you consider that for them, maybe this was just like a kind of couple of weird centuries where there wasn't a Roman Empire in the West. And like, this is more of a return to normalcy, albeit over, at least expanded to the north and east. You know, like it's certainly lost the Iberian Peninsula, but it's definitely expanded up into, you know, like Saxony and Bavaria and all these places the Romans never got into, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, it seems like a very, what am I trying to say? It seems like a very ceremonial type position. Was there any real practical significance to it other than maybe protecting the Pope a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, the protecting the Pope a little bit was definitely part of it. But basically what this does is it cements Charlemagne's rule over the Italian peninsula.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. Like, because otherwise, so it's kind of like amalgamating the Italian lands into his hereditary lands up in like what we would fucking call Germany. Right? So like, otherwise, like, what, like, why the fuck is he down here other than like he's just some guy who took over? Right? So like, he would, for example, say, like, style himself in letters, he would call himself a Charles by the grace of God, the king of the Franks and Lombards and patrician of the Romans. Right. So, and it's like, if you just like are like, bang, no, this is like this is a new Roman Empire. That makes more sense because these are all kind of like lands that do that. So really it's a kind of administrative way of justifying what the fuck he'd just done.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Yeah. So yeah, that's, you know, Holy Roman Empire. That is Charlemagne's martial and I guess territorial legacy. Just, you know, by the end, the empire, the realm of the Franks stretched from the Spanish Marches, including the city of Barcelona, all the way up, to the North Sea, obviously, Frisia. They had a tiny port in the Baltic Sea in Saxony, all the way down to the east of Salzburg, south of Rome. All of that was administered by Charlemagne's empire, and then in addition, where the Bretons were in modern day France was part of a dependent territory, and he had dependent territories all the way over past the Elbe and running along the Danube as well. So the Czechs, Moravians, Veleti, Croats, all that sort of stuff. That's all, with him as well. So he's got that. And by the end of his life, the only part of it that was in revolt was the part that he had moved over the Pyrenees, which was fighting with, trying to go back to the Umayyads or whatever. But that is Charlemagne's martial legacy, the legacy of the Kingdom of the Franks. But now probably even more important, his rule and cultural legacy. So Eleanor, before we get to the culture stuff, how did Charlemagne's rule kind of codify and set up this European land tenure system and the feudal structure with the church kind of overseeing a lot of the social aspects and social programs, really?
Yeah, so in the first place, he's doing this thing that everyone thinks is how Europe works in the Middle Ages, which is basically, it's like, if you fight for me and you're some noble, when we take over lands, I will give them to you and then you can rule them. So it's like just a straight up kind of tit for tat, right? And this gets people on side because they like things. And then, the payoff for that is that if he says go fight, you've got to show up with your boys and go fight, right? But eventually they take over enough land that there is a pretty good idea of what the boundaries are going to be. And then what he does that is really smart is he does a lot of policy. So, for example, the really famous bunch of works is, or the Admonitio Generalis, so kind of like the general laws, and the Epistola de Literis Colendis. And what he does is he sends people out with these laws to everywhere. And he's like, go get everybody. We're going to read the fucking laws aloud right now. And they just kind of round everybody up. And they're like, here's the laws, guys. We have them. Right. And that's one of the things about being Roman or being Roman emperor, is this idea that there is a centralized series of laws that can be traced back to one particular place. Right. So that's the umbrella. He's like the top of the imaginary feudal pyramid that isn't real, but the walls of it are these laws that kind of go all the way down and bind everyone into them. Yep. Right. And what that does is it creates this incredibly, for the time, stable system. Because people like that there's laws, right? People like being like, all right, well, I know what the fucking boundaries are. And Sven can't just walk over here and fuck with me now because everybody knows whose land is what and where things go. Right. So this is a really big deal for commoners. And the nobility alike. And that leads to this period of stability, which means that you can also kind of have a flourishing in stuff like the arts. Right.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And, we should be clear. Obviously, we're talking about an early medieval state, barely state. So, we're talking about stability for the time. It was still itinerant. He still traveled to a lot of places. Yes. He had to travel around his empire. And, it wasn't a state in any way in the modern sense that we think of, or even in the later medieval sense. But so you missed the cultural part. And Charlemagne is known as a huge patron of culture and art and even science. So how did he get this legacy? What did he do to stoke this? Because he even if he couldn't read, why was he enamored with culture in this way?
Well, he's trying to be Roman, right?
Well, you got me there.
And so as a part of that, he's really very specifically into classical texts and keeping a very specifically literate court. So he attracts all of these high-level intellectuals from around Europe. And this leads to the Carolingian Renaissance. So, and I'm talking like there's people at his court who've come from Ireland, like, you know, because the monasteries there are incredibly well set up. You've got people down from York. You've got Italian scholars. You've got the Spanish Christians who are kind of like fleeing the Umayyad like dynasty. And it brings all of these really high level intellectuals into Charlemagne's palace. And they all kind of agree that the thing that you want to do then is set up schools. And they do this in a couple of ways. In the first place, they patronize monasteries very heavily because, like, again, all these guys are fucking monks. Like, it's just like time to monk. Too monk, too furious, or whatever. And like, so they're like, yeah, you know what you should have is a lot more monks. So like, he gives a lot of money to like Cluny, for example. He gives a lot of money like to setting up various places, right, to do more copying of books. He also sets up schools that are free for the children of the nobility, which is kind of like also, again, anchoring into this system, right? So like one of the reasons why you want to be a noble is that your kids are going to have, you know, access to these schools, right? And then they're going to read Latin very well. They'll be numerate, and, you know, things like that, right? And then as well, this expands also to this idea that even like rural priests should have a better education, right? So it improves like religious education as well as Latin education for everyone. And this expands further than Rome ever gets. So you've got more people who are literate than there ever were in the Roman Empire, right, as a result of this. And this confuses a lot of people now because one of the big things that they come up with is a really clear script way of writing, which is Carolingian minuscule. Yeah. Shout out. Right? So it's very funny because during the quote-unquote Renaissance, like later on, when Italians are trying to go, they want to go back in time and they want to like return with a V to Rome. So they're like, let's go get some classical scripts and we're going to write like them. We're not going to write like these fucking medieval people did. And we're going to see what like, and the oldest ones they can get hold of are Carolingian ones. And they're like, see, this is what the classics were written in. And it's like, buddy. These are from the 9th century, right? So when you see humanist script, as we call it, it's based on Carolingian minuscule, which is really easy to read. And really, really nice and easy. And if I'd known what was good for me, I would have fucking studied that because it's a lot easier to read. But hey-ho, there's a lot less of it, but it's easier to read. But basically, the reason that we have like a lot of Aristotle or Cicero or Tacitus, it's all very specifically kind of like from this period where they are really very particularly trying to uphold Roman ideals and classical authors, and they spend a lot of time trying to get hold of these things. So like this is all a very medieval way of thinking about the world. You know, when you hear basic people be like, oh yeah, medieval people didn't know about Rome and the Renaissance is really good because something the classics, is like, explain that to my boy Charlemagne. Yeah. Right. Like
he couldn't read that shit, but he had a lovely library of books. I don't want to hear it. Oh, you can't read? Why do I have 1,000,000 books? Why are my manuscripts so great? Why are my codices so fantastic?
My bitch too bad. My codices too great.
Yeah, my my Vulgates too holy.
Yeah.
Get the fuck out. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I read a couple things. You know, he was big on, you know, educating certain people. You know, a lot of the practice of like the church educating people, in his case other members of the clergy and nobles, but like, you know, that starts to spread, and then later, you know, the church teaches a lot of people literacy, you know, later on. So yeah, that was him. And you know, you get all this stuff, and it's just like he's the perfect like antidote to all that stuff, because here's this guy who can't read, who is essentially a warlord, basically, who killed or tried to kill members of his family in order to secure his realm and everything, and pushed his boundaries as far as he could, and yet he was doing all this stuff. He cared enough, at least about the appearance of it, to bring all this stuff in, thought it looked cool or thought it made him important or whatever, for whatever reason, but he still brought it all together. He still cared about that stuff. So this guy who was he died in 814 and he cared about that stuff. So surely at least a couple of the people who came after him in Europe did too. Yeah. As we said, he did a lot to burnish the Catholic faith. He gave Catholics he gave the church a lot of leniency to do stuff.
Yeah.
And that was that was his thing. And last thing we'll talk about today is his death and legacy. He died in 814.
Yeah.
And what was it? He died of
pleurisy. So it's basically, which is an inflammation of the lung cavity.
Right.
And he was going pretty well up until the autumn of 813, and he got kind of sick, and then he was like, oh, I see what's going on, and he went really hard on praying and everything to make sure that he didn't go to hell. And that worked out pretty well for him. Because he's venerated, right? He had rather a lot of a lot of people like Charlemagne, right? So, he built a lot of churches, he educated a lot of guys. So there's kind of the
hagiography of him started real fast because, Song of Roland, all that stuff, that was less than 300 years after his death. And he's just the only other thing I'll say, he was somewhere between 6 foot tall and 6'4", which is anywhere from 1.8 to 1.9 meters. But he was obscenely tall. Even if he was 6 foot, he was still 4 inches taller than the average person. He would have been in the 99th percentile of height. It would be if our greatest ruler today was 6'10". Literally, six. You got LeBron James in the White House or whatever.
Yeah. And he was a Chad too. He was really he was really into swimming and shit, and basically the whole court had to go swimming every day because he went swimming every day. So if you wanted to get anywhere, you had
I love that.
Yeah. So it's he was a gym bro. He was
guys, we got to get out there. We got to do it. Yeah, Hold on, I got to go fuck my mistress. All right, back at it. Let's go.
Back at it. The grind never stops. 100, etc. So
had a bastard kid named Drogo, which I don't know anything about Drogo, but there you go.
Shout out. He became a bishop, so
Oh, well, there you go. Cool. Yeah. And the last thing is the appropriation of Charlemagne's legacy, which is one of the strangest and funniest things. You get a lot of it. Napoleon did it, which makes a lot of sense. Charlemagne is associated as a French ruler, and Napoleon was pushing those French boundaries farther than anyone since Charlemagne ever had. And, you get that. John Calvin, for some God unknown reason, thought Charlemagne was a Reformation forerunner, which is just
how?
Dog.
What?
John, man, come on. You guys got this guy, he'd never thought a whiff of anything other than Catholicism. Now, whether he lived all of it, that's another story, but he was Catholic.
Yeah. Oh, hundo P. And
in the sense that everyone then, except for the pagans and
there's no other option.
This was before there was an East and West Rome.
It's just he's just a Christian, which meant he was Catholic. Shut the fuck up, right?
Sorry, I meant Eastern and Western Catholicism. Sorry.
No, I was going with you. Don't worry about
it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it's just incredibly funny because Martin Luther was he was a pussy bitch because he shouldn't have been crowned by the Pope. Shut the fuck up, Martin Luther. Like, not for the first
That's
time.
way better than John Calvin being like, oh, actually, he's just like Jan Hus. It's like, okay, man.
Yeah, sure.
Cool.
What? Like, why? Like fucking when I'm in a dick riding competition and, you know, my opponent is John Calvin. I'm like, no.
My opponent is John Calvin. For any person who, like,
Had any power. Like,
yeah, and like questioned like the Pope once. Like he questioned him. That's it. He counts. He's one of ours. Yeah.
and it's like, well, yeah, he questioned the Pope because he was like, "Are you going to do this for me or what?" Really,
Yeah.
like in that way. Which is also, like, I mean, both Calvin and Martin Luther are just so wrong on this because like neither of them understand what the fuck's going on at the time.
Yeah, it's like his like carrot and the stick approach with the church, which is like you can have the tiniest baby carrot that's ever existed, and his stick is a fucking like anime sword that like could swing down on their heads at any time. Like, yeah, he was totally feuding with them or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and lastly, of course, because it had to happen, Hitler.
This fucking
Originally didn't like Charlemagne because he was a dirty Frenchman, and then I guess kind of realized that actually he could be like, he liberated the Germans from the Slavs. I mean, that's
Question
what he
mark?
said.
Yeah,
I don't mean to
exactly.
do question mark. That's literally what he said.
Yeah,
But yeah.
right.
You know, I don't know, man. I'm not going to defend any of these people. Charlemagne wasn't like a good guy or whatever, but yeah, I don't know. I don't
think so, bro.
Yeah, I don't think that's what he was doing, man. This was like when they all tried to when the fascists tried to appropriate Dante's legacy after his death, and they were like, no, he was a famous Italian. Like, I mean, theoretically, dude, but like,
kinda, you know, that's
like
he doesn't have a concept of that, right? It's like, how the fuck can he be German? There's like, no, like, he's fucking Frankish. Shut up.
Yeah, he was Frankish. They weren't even called the German lands then. Whatever.
Ugh.
Yeah. Anyway, it's you know, Charlemagne. He does you know, he is very important. Like, we hope that we've gotten that across because, like, I mean, he really did do the template for the Middle Ages. Like, you know, that's kind of how it was. Even if nobody did the military, you know, call up system exactly like he did, they, you know, a lot of them did some version of it, and you know, and then all of that stuff was exported up to England when, you know, the French invaded up there, and blah 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 blah. That's you know, that's medieval Europe, and that's Charlemagne. But yeah, he's not one of my like favorite guys. I think he, you know, there's interesting stuff about Charlemagne, but Hitler, stay the fuck away, man.
Yeah, fuck off.
John Calvin, Hitler, stay away. Napoleon, I mean, I guess you're French too, and you did have an empire, so you can pull that one. The rest of you, what the fuck are you doing?
I need you to not.
What is this confusing shit? Just pull someone else. Just be like Frederick Barbarossa. He's right there. He's actually. It's fine. Whatever. Anyway, yeah, that's Charlemagne. As we said, we hope you enjoyed it. Next time we will come back to talk about, man, the amazingly dipshit fail sons of Charlemagne, Pepin, also known as Pepin the Hunchback, which yeesh, Charles the Younger, Pepin of Italy, and Louis the Pious.
God bless
his four true-born sons, anyway. His other sons, yeah. Whatever. So yeah, that's what we got for today. As we said, we'll be back on Friday with a bonus episode, next entry in our series on the Name of the Rose.
Woo!
So sign up for the Patreon if that is something you are interested in, and hearing us talk about Umberto Eco and monks going crazy because they saw like the wildest bas relief in history. Yeah, they just fucking love that shit.
Love it.
Yeah. Eleanor, what's going on with you?
I've got a new YouTube video up for work. You go check that out. It's about who was the first Queen of England. I hate the way I look in it, but you know what?
It was me. Why do you come on?
Fuck it, we ball. All right, like high energy. No. We're out here.
Your hair looks great. What are you talking about?
I think it's just uncanny valley. I don't like seeing myself, but anyway, go watch it because it convinces my bosses to give me more work. That'd be good. Otherwise, I'm fucking around on the socials at Going Medieval as per usual. Yeah, I think that's mostly what's up. Yeah.
Yeah. You can catch me social media complaining variously about various things. I'm making Simpsons jokes. Luke is amazing. You guys know the deal. It's pretty standard for me. You can check out my old show, People's History of the Old Republic, if you want to hear me talking about Star Wars. But yeah, that's all we got for today, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.